I recently came across this article called Technical Writing Tips for Non-Native English Speakers, and it resonated with me a lot, and I think it will be very beneficial to the audience of this channel. I frequently get questions about technical writing as a career from people who are non-native English speakers, and these are usually people who have learned English or who have had their primary education in English, but English is not their native language. I usually find that the questions fall in two categories. The first category of questions is from people who are very confident in their English language skills, and their approach is more like, I already know English, so it should be easy for me to get into tech writing, right? Like, just tell me what to do, and then I can easily become a tech writer. And the second category of questions is from people who have also learned English, but they're not as confident in their English language skills. So their questions are more around, can I even do this? I'm not a native English language speaker. Is technical writing still an option for me? So the questions kind of deal with either overconfidence in their language skills or underconfidence in their language skills. And my answer or recommendation for both the scenarios is you need to practice, because even if you know English, like you have studied English, the way we are taught English in non-native countries is very different from what our audience who are native speakers are used to. So you need to practice and you need to study how to bridge the gap between English taught in non-native countries and the audience who are native speakers and are used to a different type of English. That's one thing that's very important to know, is that English is not a controlled language. I think French is a controlled language. There is right or wrong French, but there is no right or wrong English. English is more like a tool for communication, and the usage of it depends on the people using it. So Indian English is different from American English, is different from British English, is different from African English, and all of them are perfectly valid in the scenarios in which they are used. You know what I mean? But when you're a tech writer, you have to cross those boundaries, and then what form of English you use depends on the audience, not the writer. So I am a person who grew up learning English as my primary language of education, but my proficiency is in Indian English or British English at max. I have to make constant efforts to make sure that the audience that I write for, who are primarily American English speakers, can understand what I'm trying to say. And so I have to make this bridge between my version of English and their version of English, and then their version of English has to be the priority. Just because I am familiar with English does not mean I can write for an American audience. If you're an American writer, it does not mean you can write for a global audience. Just getting that mindset right is important, because once you figure out what you're trying to achieve, it's easier to figure out a plan to achieve that. But if you're not aware that this is a thing that you need to pay attention to, then it becomes difficult to become successful as a tech writer. So with that said, I want to review this article because I think it has some really good tips on how to bridge that gap and how to practice bridging that gap. And yeah, so let's just get into it. So this article is by Vitor Palladini, whose first language is Portuguese. And he talks about how he didn't feel comfortable writing articles in English, even though he could read them really well. So he started this tradition of deliberate practice, which helped him develop his English writing skills. The first tip he gives is overcoming the mental barrier. Writing in a language that you didn't grow up speaking can be hard by itself, but one thing that makes it worse is thinking that you need to be fluent even to start writing. You don't. If you don't feel confident with your current English writing skills, write anyway. One thing that can happen is that after you're done, you may not feel comfortable publishing it, and that's okay. You can always come back and rewrite it after your writing skill improves. Worst case scenario, you'll have a draft and a slight increase in your English composition skills. Win-win. I 100% agree with this. I think this speaks to the segment of people who are familiar with English but don't feel as confident, and my recommendation for them is just write. Just Keep on writing, but be intentional in your practice. Like every time you pick up a draft to write, make sure that you're paying attention to one aspect of writing, and then by the end of that draft, make sure that you have worked on that aspect. It's very overwhelming to think of it in terms of I need to work on my English skills. That's like a huge goal. An easier way is to break it down into smaller chunks or like small baby steps and be like, okay, today I'm going to focus on my articles. Today I'm going to focus on my structure. Today I'm going to focus on the readability of my document. So set specific goals for each draft that you write and then make sure that you accomplish that goal by the end of that draft. The second tip he gives is your first paragraphs will suck. Yes, they will. Mine did, and it takes some effort. I read somewhere on the internet that the only way to write a good article is to write 1,000 crappy articles. So true. The same applies to any skill you'll want to develop. Learning goes hand in hand with repetition. Yes. You need to be patient and focused and keep writing. Set a small time frame for writing every day. Try to make it a small habit. I cannot agree with this more. Practice is so important, and it breaks my heart that so many people who want to be tech writers are not willing to put in the time and effort and the practice to become better writers. So if you are serious about becoming a tech writer, you have to practice. And this idea of setting a small time frame every day and then writing every day for that period of time, even if it is just for 25 minutes, it would go a long way in helping you become a better writer. His next tip is plan your text but not too much. Remember that you're writing in a second language and oftentimes you will be translating and writing at the same time, which can be quite tiresome. Yep, very true. Things get much easier when you start to actually think about your text in English. But until then, you need to improve your writing experience in other ways. Try writing down the core idea of your text and how you will expand it. This will help you anchor down your train of thought and help you focus on that specific subject. But also, do not overplan it. Write down some initial structure, but don't get paralyzed by it. You can always change it if it doesn't sound right anymore. Again, a very good tip. So, this is something that is called a snowflake method of writing, which is if you're writing about a particular subject, just write the core idea, like the very basic, the very crux of that idea on paper, and then see how you would expand it. It is actually a technique that writers use for writing novels, but I also find it useful for tech writing. I'll leave a link to a snowflake method video in the description box below if you want to go check it out. Next step is write first, correct later. Writing takes a considerable amount of mental energy. Save some brain bandwidth and try not to worry if your grammar and spelling are perfect in your first draft. Try your best to not be insecure while writing. Focus on transferring the ideas from your head to the paper. No one but yourself is judging you right now. After you're done, then you should do grammar and spell check. There are quite a few free online tools that help you with that. I prefer writing in Google Docs as its native spell check is excellent. Again, 100% agree with this. This is why I recommend having your first draft as the throwaway draft, which is just brain dump everything in your head onto the page. Don't think about grammar and spelling. And once you have that, then you can play around with grammar and spelling and structure and make sense of it for your audience. But yes, I am a very ardent believer in getting the first draft done in any way you need to. So set a timer for 25 minutes and just free write, just get it out of your head, or just do free speaking where you talk it out loud and then you record yourself and then you transcribe it. There are so many ways to getting the first draft done. I did a whole series on my writing process of how I get the first draft done, and then I do an audience analysis, and then I start working on the actual structure and grammar and spelling and stuff. I'll leave a link to the series in the description box below. You can go check it out. Moving on. This is my favorite tip because I use this so much, and this is quote search when unsure. Have you ever written a sentence that, despite being grammarly correct, sounds a little bit off? Whenever that happens, I search it between quotation marks on Google. And then he has this very helpful screen grab of how to do it. And the trick is, if it returns lots of results, it probably means that the sentence is right. And if it appears in like a reputable source like a book or dictionary, it's more likely that it's right. So if you're unsure of a phrase, or like you think something's right but not quite, just search it in quotation marks on Google, and then Google will return results where that phrase appears exactly as it is. And if it appears on multiple results, then you probably got it right. And if not, you'll also find ways to make it better, or like find the right phrase. And the next tip is simple is best. Try not to be too flamboyant, ostentatious, or over elaborate. English has fantastic words that roll out of the mouth and sound incredible, like flabbergasted. I love that word. But remember that you're writing a technical piece and the subject is too complex already. Oh my god, I love this article so much. This is my biggest criticism of people who want to become tech writers but are not willing to put in the practice, is that they end up kind of demonstrating their vocabulary in a technical piece. But the whole point of tech writing is that the subject matter is already very complex, so you need to keep your language as simple as possible. One way to think about it that I read somewhere and it just stuck with me is that tech writing is like fine wine in a glass, and technology or the subject matter that you're writing about is like the fine wine. You want your audience to focus on the delicious wine, and language is like the glass, and you don't want your audience to focus on the glass. If your language is distracting the audience from the subject matter, that is not good writing. So especially for non-native English speakers, we get into this thing of like we want to demonstrate how good we are with the language and demonstrate our English language skills, but tech writing is not the place for that. Keep your language as simple as possible and avoid complex words. That does not mean avoid complex jargon, because if that's the way the technology is described, you have to use those words, but keep your overall language simple and clear. Clarity and concision are more important than how strong your vocabulary is. He further goes to say that I'm not only talking fancy words, try to keep your paragraphs simple and easy to understand. Keeping it simple also lowers your surface area for grammatical errors. So true. A good rule of thumb is that if after a single read you can't capture the paragraph's core idea, it is too complex. Oh my god, yes. Every paragraph should convey only one idea. If it is conveying multiple ideas, you need to break up the paragraphs. Remember that your goal is to transfer your knowledge to an audience, so try and make it as easy as possible for them. 100%. If it is serious business, find a proofreader. People usually don't mind small mistakes if your content is good enough. If someone points out a grammar fix in your comments, thank them, fix it, and move on. It's not personal. Yes. Now, if the piece that you're writing is for some kind of hiring process, or it will be featured at a medium that has no edit button, you better find a good proofreader. This is something that I highly advocate, especially for non-native English speakers, is to work with editors or like find people to proofread and edit your piece. So every document that I write, and I'm not kidding, this is literally for every document that I write, I edit it myself. I have my own self-editing process. So once I'm happy with it, I send it for a technical review, which is usually reviews by the engineer who worked on the feature and also the product manager for that feature. So once we are done with technical reviews, we send it for peer reviews, which is a fellow tech writer reviews the article for grammatical errors and structures and just like good writing practices. And we have a round robin system. So I review another writer's work, they review the next writer's work, and we just go around in a circle. And then the final review is by my manager, who does the final editorial review. And once he approves the article, then we publish it. So every piece of document that I write goes through multiple editing process, and by the end of it, I'm very confident that it's a solid piece of tech writing. And that is a privilege that I'm very, very grateful for. That is a practice that I highly recommend, especially for non-native speakers. That's it for this video. I hope this was helpful, and I highly recommend you go check out the article. I'll leave a link to it in the description box below. If you liked this video, subscribe to the channel for more tech writing videos. And for even more tech writing tips and advice, subscribe to the newsletter linked in the description box below. Thanks for watching. Bye.